everyone, welcome back to my channel. I really wanted to come in here and talk about a book I just finished, and that is Carrie Russell's Swamplandia. Karen Russell, I'm sorry. This is an author I had not read before. This is the book that I read for my book club this month in September, and yeah, I want to come in here and talk about it while it's all still fresh. So the premise of the book is that it's a alligator theme park in Florida, and the very beginning of the story begins with a family member dying. I'm not spoiling anything. This is, I think, what the premise of the book is. The mom of the family dies. She dies, and then the rest of the family then has to deal with her death. And this is where, overall, I did not like this book. This was not my favorite book I've ever read, and kind of out of 5 stars, I would probably give it a 1.5, maybe 2. The only reason why I would give it a 2 rather than a 1 or 1.5 is because after talking through the book with my book club, there were some elements in here that I did really appreciate. So first off, it's a really hard book to read because these people are grieving. They're grieving and nothing is happening in the story. Right? I read the first 50 pages in my first sit down with this book, and I didn't want to finish reading it. Like I didn't feel connected to the characters. Nothing was happening, and it just was not very interesting. But I pushed myself to continue reading because it was for my book club. So I am kind of glad that I continued reading it and that I finished it. But I don't know that I got much out of this book. And I think it's because what one of my book club members talked about was that to her it spoke to her about grief, and she has gone through a significant death in her family, and so it spoke to her at a very personal level. I've experienced grief, but from kind of a more detached state where I haven't had any of my immediate family members pass away, and so it's hard for me to imagine what you go through, right? The characters in this story make choices that you don't like and you don't agree with, or at least that I didn't, but it also is clear that they're doing it out of grief, that they don't know how to deal with the death of the mother, and that they needed counseling. Essentially, they need counseling, and they need to completely redo their lives after this loss. And so it's really difficult to read that kind of thing. And I'm not opposed to reading sad or depressing stories. Here it's just one of those things where it was hard to connect with the characters and to really get something out of it when not a lot was happening. I did like some elements in here, which is why I'm not giving it 0 stars. One of the brothers, so we were mostly following Ava throughout the book, but Kiwi is her brother, and the stories of kind of his adventure, what he's going through, that I really liked. And I think because I connected more to him than to anybody else, because he's like the one realist in the family, where he realizes that the park is going into bankruptcy and that someone's got to do something about it. But he's 17 and he can't really do anything significant enough to help, but he's trying. So he leaves the island and he goes to the mainland, and he tries to earn enough money to save his family's theme park, and ultimately he can't. It's just not possible. He's 17 and will never make enough money to really make a dent in the debt. The other thing I did really like about the writing style was the poetry in it. She's normally a short story writer, and I could very much see that. And there are elements or parts in here in which the writing is just beautiful. This is on page 221, and I'll read you just a small paragraph here. It says, "Life was a phonograph in an empty room. The world was a silent record turning. Whatever song we are making in this place, we are going to die without hearing." Such was Kiwi Stone thinking on a rainy Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. with 5 hours and 14 minutes of his shift left to go. He was back to pushing the vacuum again, filling in for Leonard. And so that, I think, is really beautiful and sad. And maybe that's what this book is. It's just beautiful and sad. And I didn't like it overall. I ended up not liking it, and most people in my book club ended up not liking it as well. I have since then looked at some reviews on BookTube, and there are people that like it, and I completely see why people like it. There is this kind of big moment in the book towards the end. Something terrible happens to one of the characters, and it's kind of like the last, like, how much terribleness can you take, you know? And I'm still kind of processing that element of the story. I think it did influence the fact that I didn't like the book, and part of it was that element of the story, and the fact that this thing happens to Ava, to our main character, and nothing is done about it. She doesn't tell anybody about it, and I didn't see it coming. Some people talk about having seen it coming. I did not see this terrible thing coming. There are hints. Looking back, there are hints there, but the story really plays with fantasy, right? What is fantasy? What is real? And so I suspended belief on a lot of the things that were happening, and just accepted the character's word for the fact that this is happening and this is normal. And turns out you shouldn't do that with every element of the story. So that's why I found it shocking, and I think it affected me more than it probably did other people. Now, that element of the fantasy element, I think that when I realized that was part of what was happening, it did add an extra interesting dimension to the book. There's this whole discussion about the underworld. And I've read Virgil's The Aeneid, and so that spoke to me very much about that kind of Greek mythology of this world in which people go to after they die, and there's different places, and of course, for some of the characters in this book, you want to go to it because you just lost your mother, right? But it's also, there's a lot of danger involved in here, and a lot of mental illness, especially, right? Like, who actually wants to go to the underworld? Well, if you're looking for a loved one, right? Or if you basically have lost your mind a little bit, and these people have. The dad in the story is completely unlikable from my point of view. Like, he's trying to go on with life, but he doesn't see his children. He is too busy dealing with his own grief and doesn't realize that his children need him and that they need him now, right? Anyway, I think that's a lot of the elements that I wanted to note from the book. It's a sad, melancholic book that didn't give me a good feeling as I was reading it. I didn't find any bit of happiness in it, other than these people's lives will go on. They'll go on, but they're going on with a huge hole in them, and it's really tough. It's a tough read for me. So I would not recommend it for everybody. I think if you like Karen Russell's writing, if you've read some of her short stories, you'll probably like it. But if you are not into those really slow, really sad stories, then I don't think you'll like it. I think it does take being in a particular mood to read certain books. And I read this book while sleep deprived most of the time. So it just, like, it affected me emotionally, and not in a positive way. I like to be affected emotionally by books, but not in a, oh my god, this is so sad and depressing and I hate this story kind of way, which is how I felt reading this book. But intellectually, I could get things out of it, but emotionally and just as a for fun reading, it did not work for me. It just didn't work for me. So that is my review of Swamplandia. Let me know if you've read it and what you've thought about it down below. I'm especially interested in people's opinions that liked it, because I think there are things to like in here, but I think a lot depends on the reader in this case. So I'm interested in people's opinions, but that is it for me. I will see you